Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're getting into something, well, something I think almost everyone feels, especially when things get quiet. You know, that persistent, sticky feeling of guilt, even when, logically you haven't actually done anything wrong. We're talking about that quiet sort of suffering, maybe just for existing or for resting when you feel you shouldn't be, or even, dare I say it, enjoying something without feeling like you had to earn it first.
Right. And it's crucial to distinguish this from, say, a healthy conscience. We're not really talking about the moral compass today. It's more like this psychic background noise. This deep dive really is about digging into the psychological roots of this chronic feeling and tracing it back not just to us, to personal failure, but maybe to the demands of culture itself, the power structures that kind of depend on us feeling, well, not quite good enough.
Yeah, because actual guilt, genuine guilt, we understand that, right?
Yeah.
You lie, you cheat, you hurt someone, you feel bad, that makes sense. But this other thing, this sort of structural guilt, it's like a low-grade hum. That sense you're always failing some invisible standard, failing the potential you.
Exactly. And that brings us to a pretty stark idea, maybe even a brutal one, that comes out of the thinking we're exploring, this pervasive sense of being indebted, of falling short. It might not be a bug, but a feature, not a reaction to sin, but disturbingly a requirement of civilization. So we really need to look at how that inner judge gets installed, because without it, well, maybe culture can't maintain order in the same way.
Okay, installed. Let's unpack that. If it's not our conscience, what is this? This inner critic, this thing keeping score even when we're trying to sleep?
Well, in certain frameworks, it's often referred to as the superego, the internalized voice of authority, of prohibition. And what's really fascinating, or maybe unsettling, is that it's not innate. You're not born with it fully formed. It's something that gets, well, installed, built through your life, through interactions.
Installed. That sounds less like growing a conscience and more like getting an operating system update you never agreed to.
That's a sharp way to put it, actually, yeah. So you can think of the superego as this sort of psychic monument to every no you've ever heard, every rule, every expectation, maybe every fear, absorbed from parents, teachers, society, culture, economic pressures, all kind of compressed into this inner voice. And it's relentless. It doesn't just advise, it prosecutes.
Okay, so the difference between conscience and this, superego, is critical then. Conscience looks at an action, right? Did I do the wrong thing?
Yes, it tends to evaluate external actions. Did you steal the pen? Did you tell the lie? The superego, though, operates on a completely different level. It's far more invasive and often far more punishing because it judges and punishes desires, intentions, impulses. It doesn't really care if you actually screamed at your boss. It cares that you wanted to. It cares if you secretly desired rest when the culture screams hustle. If you had even a flicker of a selfish thought, whatever that means in context, that potential, that internal movement, that's already a crime in the superego's courtroom.
Wow. That level of internal surveillance, it's intense. I'm thinking about that historical example. The Soviet citizen, maybe in the 30s, feeling terrified and ashamed just for dreaming criticism of the state. Hadn't said a word, hadn't done a thing, but the impulse itself felt criminal.
That's a perfect, stark illustration of how tyrannical this internal judge can become. The thought itself is the transgression. And, it translates directly into modern life, even without a totalitarian state breathing down your neck. The tribunal is just internal now. We feel shame for, wasted hours, unfulfilled potential, ambition that didn't pan out. We're constantly comparing ourselves, right, on trial by the productivity tribunal or the Instagram tribunal, always judged against some curated perfection. The superego's core function in this view is to ensure you always feel you owe more time, more effort, more self-optimization. You're never quite enough.
Okay, so if the superego keeps us feeling perpetually inadequate, why? What's the payoff? Why would civilization or culture kind of engineer this outcome? What's the benefit to the system, I mean?
Well, if you step back and look at the bigger picture, culture, society, it needs us to be, broadly speaking, manageable, predictable, functional, and achieving that level of order seems to require binding or maybe even breaking some of our rawest core instincts. Civilization, you could argue, is fundamentally built on renunciation, on saying no to certain parts of ourselves.
Renunciation of what exactly? We're talking about this really deep, messy, powerful drives, aren't we? Like Eros, the life drive, and the Thanatos, the death drive.
Exactly. Raw, Eros, the drive for pleasure, connection, merging creation, and raw Thanatos, which isn't just death, but also aggression, assertion, destruction, boundary breaking, the drive towards dissolution. Both of these, in their raw forms, are inherently disruptive to social stability. You can't have a functioning society if everyone acts on every impulse for immediate pleasure or unrestrained aggression.
Yeah, right. That makes sense. Society needs rules, limits. But
Sure.
here's where I'm trying to connect the dots. If these drives are so fundamental, so powerful, how do most of us manage not to be constantly acting out? What's the specific mechanism that binds them? And crucially, how does that relate back to this pervasive guilt? How does managing instincts turn into feeling bad?
Okay, so one primary way culture deals with this raw energy is through sublimation, redirecting it, twisting that raw energy into socially acceptable, even productive forms. So maybe aggression gets channeled into ambition, into competition in the marketplace. Desire gets channeled into, say, focused work, productivity, maybe even art. But there's another key mechanism, especially relevant to guilt, and that's the internalization of aggression.
Internalization, meaning turning it back on ourselves.
Precisely. Think about it. We're constantly told, in various ways, to suppress aggression. Nice people don't get angry, don't make a scene, be strong, don't show vulnerability, which often includes anger. So you feel that surge of anger, that justified rage perhaps, and you stifle it. You follow the social rule. But that energy, it doesn't just evaporate, it has to go somewhere.
So it boomerangs.
It boomerangs back inside. You become the target of your own aggression, and the superego, that internalized authority, steps in and punishes you. It punishes you with guilt. Often, not even for the anger itself, but for the failure to express it, or for feeling it in the first place. It's a kind of double bind.
Wait, so I follow the rule, I suppress the anger like I'm supposed to, and I get punished for that with guilt? That seems incredibly counterproductive, almost cruel.
It reveals the, shall we say, the psychological cost of maintaining social order in this way. The irony is quite sharp. Think about that classic example. The tense family dinner. You bite your tongue. You don't say the thing that needs saying to keep the peace, to avoid conflict, to be nice. You successfully obey the cultural script. But later, alone, you feel what? Often a hollow feeling. Maybe shame. And yes, often guilt.
Yeah, I recognize that feeling. But why guilty? I did the right thing according to the social code.
Because the superego, in this internal court, isn't necessarily aligned with keeping the peace. It might be punishing you for what it perceives as weakness or cowardice. It punishes the failure to assert yourself, the failure to speak the truth as you felt it, even though the external social pressure demanded that silence. So the culture sets the impossible rule: be polite, suppress conflict, and then your internalized judge punishes you for the inevitable psychological fallout of obeying that rule. You feel guilty for the aggression you swallowed.
Okay, so this leads to a really strange paradox, doesn't it? The more we try to be good, the more we try to fit in and follow the rules of civilization, the louder this internal critic, this superego, seems to get. It's like striving for morality makes the guilt worse. Why? Why would culture need us in this state of constant quiet suffering? What's the ultimate point?
Because, arguably, culture isn't primarily invested in our happiness. It's invested in our obedience, our productivity, our manageability. Guilt, in this sense, isn't the flaw in the system. It's the leash. It's the invisible fence that keeps us striving, conforming, and crucially, feeling like we constantly owe something more. It's a mechanism of control.
And we actually cling to this feeling. That sounds masochistic. Why would we hold on to guilt?
Well, maybe cling implies too much conscious choice for most people.
Yeah.
But subconsciously, perhaps. Because feeling guilty, paradoxically, offers a strange kind of psychic reassurance. It proves you're still in. You've internalized the rules. You feel the appropriate badness for your transgressions, real or imagined, which confirms you're not a dangerous outsider, not a threat to the tribe. We might subconsciously choose the familiar ache of guilt over the terrifying uncertainty of true freedom, or the fear of genuine exile from the group's norms. It's the devil you know.
Let's bring this down to everyday life, this algorithmic guilt you mentioned earlier. Like, okay, I spend 3 hours watching some objectively terrible reality TV instead of, I don't know, cleaning the house or learning Mandarin, and boom, the guilt hits.
Yes, and that guilt isn't really about the quality of the TV show, is it? It's purely functional guilt. It's the superego enforcing a very modern, very specific commandment. Thou shalt always be productive, thou shalt optimize thy time. Leisure that isn't productive or restorative for future productivity. Pleasure just for pleasure's sake. It violates the underlying economic demand that your time should always yield some kind of return. The guilt over the trash TV is your inner judge enforcing the cultural mandate. Don't waste time, monetize it, optimize it, improve yourself with it.
And social media. Comparing your messy real life to someone's perfectly curated online feed, that feeling of being a fraud, of not measuring up, that's not just low self-esteem.
It's deeper than that, or at least it plugs into this deeper mechanism. You've internalized the cultural demand for flawless performance, for constant success and happiness, visually demonstrated. When your reality inevitably falls short of that curated perfection, the imperfect vacation, the missed workout, the struggling project, the superego administers the shame. The culture projects these often impossible standards, and your internalized judge carried out the sentence when you failed to meet them. It's internalized cultural aggression.
Which brings us to maybe the most, well, profound and frankly unsettling idea from this line of thought. This chronic nagging guilt isn't really ours. It's not an intrinsic personal flaw, it's an inheritance.
Exactly. It's the echo, the psychic residue of every system, economic, religious, patriarchal, colonial, you name it, that ever needed individuals to be smaller, quieter, more compliant, less demanding, so they can be used more effectively. It's the voice of generations of expectations, norms, and prohibitions installed inside your own head, a kind of psychic colonizer. It holds your deepest impulses, your eros and thanatos captive, and then charges you rent in the currency of guilt just for wanting them back.
So if we follow this all the way through, this quiet guilt we carry around isn't a sign we're broken. It's actually a sign the system is working perfectly in a way, keeping us striving, keeping us quiet, keeping us functional within its demands. Realizing that, that potentially changes everything, doesn't it? It reframes the whole feeling. It's not my personal failing.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And that recognition is the key. The path forward, if there is one, isn't trying to fix the guilt by being better or more disciplined or striving harder, because that just feeds the superego. It validates its premise. The path is, well, it's awareness, recognition. It's about tracing that critical voice back to its source, understanding that it's often a borrowed voice. It's the voice of civilization, of culture, of power, speaking through you, using your own psychic apparatus against you, recognizing it as an implanted program, an inheritance rather than an essential truth about yourself. That's the first, maybe the hardest step towards dismantling its power.
But that it implies being willing to face what's underneath the guilt, doesn't it? The potential messiness, the chaos maybe that the guilt is supposed to keep in check. The fear that without that leash, we might actually become, unmanageable.
Yes. It requires confronting that fear, the deep-seated terror of freedom, perhaps, the anxiety that without this internal structure of judgment and debt we might face emptiness, or worse, unleash something destructive. We spend so much energy being managing ourselves according to these internalized rules. But beneath that fear, beneath the constant noise of the superego, something else is there, something alive, something that pulses with that raw, untamed energy of eros, and maybe the uncompromising assertion of thanatos too. So the real question, the one to sit with, is perhaps this. If you could really truly stop feeling guilty for nothing, if you could recognize that inner judge as an external imposition, an inherited ghost, and politely or not so politely show at the door, what would you finally allow yourself to feel? What would you allow yourself to desire? What might you finally demand?